Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Victory Design. Thank you guys for being in our space today. Today we'll continue our class on web development, and today we'll be talking on the topic understanding CSS specificity, a comprehensive guide. So welcome guys. Whether you're just starting out in web development or looking to brush up on your skills, understanding how CSS specificity works is crucial for creating effective styles for your web pages. Now let's dive into this wonderful concept together. First of all, what is CSS specificity? Now in the context of CSS, it is a set of rules that determines which styles are applied to an element when multiple styles could apply. Now imagine you have a button or a web page and you want it to have a specific background color. However, there are multiple CSS rules that could actually affect that button's appearance. Now, this actually helps the browser decide which rule takes precedence, like which one it should obey first. Why is it important? Why is specificity actually important? Now, it is important because it allows you to control how styles are applied across your website. Without a clear understanding of how it actually works, you might find yourself in a situation whereby your styles don't appear as they are expected, leading to frustration and confusion. So you actually need to understand this because you need to understand how your CSS obey rules in terms of applying the styles you have given it to do. Now there's an hierarchy of selectors. Now what does this mean? CSS has a hierarchy for the weight given to different types of selectors. This hierarchy determines which styles will be applied and when they are conflicts. Now let's break them down into different types. The first one is what the type selectors. Now, these ones are the most generic form of styling. They target HTML elements by their type, such as headings, which is your H1, H2, and thereabouts, paragraphs, button, and there, and of course, we all know what I'm talking about. Now, in this case, all buttons on the page will have a blue background. Let's say, for example, let's practicalize that. Let's go to our button, of which in this button of which in this button, where's the button here? We gave it a background color of purple. Now, all buttons in the page, as far as they have this type selector of button, will have a what? A purple background. However, because of type selectors and they are quite broad, they can easily be overridden by more specific selectors. Meaning that if we should see apply a particular kind of rule for this same button, it will override this purple. Purple will not display. That is why it's like an hierarchy. So like the most important ones will get applied first, followed by the less important ones. That's just the way it actually works. Now going forward, the next type we have is what the class selectors. Now these selectors are they target elements based on their class attributes, which allows for more specific styling than type selectors. Now you can actually apply a class to one or more elements in your HTML. And the last on the list is the ID selectors, which are even more specific and target elements based on their unique ID attributes. Now, based on these three type of selectors, the most important one, like if you should apply these three selectors to a particular element, the CSS would actually obey these ID selectors first before obeying the class selectors and then the type selectors, meaning that the ID selectors are more important. They have let me say in terms of the hierarchy, they are the highest. They are the highest. The CSS tend to obey them first before thinking of applying any other type of selector. Hope you understand that. Now let's consider an example where we have three type of selectors affecting the same button. And let's go back to our code and practicalize that. Now this we already have a button, right? We already have a button element here, of which you gave it a color of what? Of purple. Let's say we want to make it to be red. Let's change to red. Okay, let's make that red, right? Now and then we go back and then let's create something else. I'm coming, let me just clean up this height, take that off. Let's take that off. Now let's this is what let's say this is the type selector of that particular button. And then we are going to give it a class name, of which we call the class name favorite button. Now let's go back to that button and give it a class name. So let's say class, giving it what? Favorite button, favorite, favorite button, right? So we're giving it a class to the same button, and then we'll also give it an ID, an ID of special button. Now, if you please take note, guys, this button, we've actually given it three types of selectors. Now, the first selector that we're going to apply to this button is what we call the type selector, which is making use of this tag name, which is already button. Then we gave it a class of what? Favorite button, and they will give it an ID of what? Special button. So in this button tag, we can actually apply the three kinds of selectors, which is the type selector, or rather the tag selector, then the class selector, and also the ID selector. We've given them all the needed names. Now going back to our CSS, now we want to use just that one button that has different types of selectors and apply different rules to them and see which one it will obey first according to the hierarchy. Now the first one we've applied now is what we call the tag selector, or rather the type selector. We've applied that in time when your CSS goes to your HTML, right? It goes there and look for the button tag and applies on it background color red. Now on that same button, we are now going to make use of the class selector, of which the class name is what? Favorite button. So coming here, we then say dot, because classes always have an attribute which is dot. So always make sure to put the dot before you put the class name. So what do? We say dot, right? Dot favorite button, favorite what? Button, right? Followed by our braces. Then let's say we'll change it to what? Background color, blue. And then making use of the ID selector, which is what? Hash. Always remember, guys, for class, for you to target your class selector, you have to always make use of dot. For you to target your ID selector, you always have to make use of what? Hash. So let's make use of hash. Hash. What is the name of the ID selector? Special button. So that will say special word, special button. Followed by our braces. Then we say background color, green. Now note, guys, that for the same button, we gave it the same button. We gave those button three the three types of what? Of selectors, and then we are trying to style them making use of the three selectors. So we've applied three kinds of styles on the same button. Now let's see which one would actually get applied first. Now the button would normally be blue due to the type selector. It should normally be blue due to the type, or it should normally be red rather, due to the type selector. The class selector will change it to what? To blue, as you can see here. However, since the ID selector is what? Is the most specific, like I said earlier, the final style will be applied as green. Normally, if we should go to our live, we should go live and check this, the button would normally be red. But because the class selector is higher than the tag selector, it should be blue. But now we've applied a last type of selector, which is what? The tag selector. So and this tag selector has the highest hierarchy. Let's just say that it is the one to be obeyed the most. Let's say we have the president, we have the governor, and then we have the senator. The president is the one having the most power, right? So therefore, the ID selector is like the president here. When the three of them are standing or are being applied, the person they will that the CSS will obey first is going to be what? The ID selector, because it is the one with the highest hierarchy, followed by the class selector, followed by the type selector. So now if we should go live on this and check what we just did, it's supposed to show us green, because green is what, as you can see, voila guys, as you can see here, it's supposed to show, it's showing us green. Why? Because it obeys the person, or rather the selector with the highest hierarchy, which is the ID selector. So this actually shows how hierarchy works in CSS selectors. This illustrates how speciality actually works in practice and why it is essential for us to understand all these when applying styles. Now, also, after understanding specificity, let's talk about an escape route. Let's talk about an escape route. And that escape route is what we call the important keyword. Now, the important key, let me just type it out here for you guys to see. The importance keyword, which is something like this, is something like this, is like this, then important, important, just as simple as that. Now this keyword you are seeing here overrules this hierarchy rule we already have on ground. Now you may encounter things whereby you want to ensure that a particular style is applied regardless of this specificity rule. You want that even if there's a hierarchy here already, you want that that particular element be applied a particular style. Now you can override that by making use of this importance rule. Now how do we do that? Let's particularize that. Now let's say we go back to this class attributes, right? And we want this particular class attribute that if the CSS is trying to pick among those three, which one to obey. Remember, it is supposed among the three, it's supposed to pick the ID selector. Why? Because it is like the king of them all. But you don't want it to pick the king. You want to pick this class selector, which is like the queen. What do? You override it. How do you override it? You then come here, after putting in your semicolon, you come here and then you make use of this important keyword, which is this, and an exclamation mark followed by the word important, important, and semicolon. That's simple. Let's and you have to put a color before it. Let's just say yellow. And then you do what? Control save. Now let's just say we'll make use of the color yellow. Or rather, yellow. Now mind you, okay, good. Let's still go with our color blue. Okay. Now what do? After making use of now, please guys, focus on what I'm about to do. Now after making use of background color blue, we want this blue to be to override this color green that is supposed to be. So after writing this important keyword, we remove the semicolon. So basically, this important keyword should be after the color. Hope you understand. Now, if you notice, normally after putting in the background color red, there should always be a semicolon after it. But now there should be no semicolon before the important word, the important keyword. Okay, so just put in your blue and then your important word, then semicolon. These two goes together. All right. So now, if we should control save this and view it in our browser, let's see what will actually happen. Supposedly it's supposed to have been supposed to override this ID selector and then display blue for us instead of green. So that's what we expect to see. We should actually see green here. So let's try to view that in our browser. Please guys, do note that although it is nice to make use of what, as you can see, it's showing blue here, showing blue instead of green, okay, because it has override the ID selector. Now, please note that although it can be useful, right, although this important keyword can be useful in certain situations, it's generally recommended not to actually use it all the time. You have to use it sparingly. Overusing important keywords can lead to messy code and make debugging difficult because it breaks the natural cascading order of CSS rules. So it's only when it's a must, like you cannot do without making use of that. That is when you should make use of this keyword, right? And you should make use of the keyword because although it is useful, right, it is recommended that you should make use of it sparingly. Sparingly, that is, rarely make use of it, only when you just have to make use of it. All right. So instead of relying on importance, try to structure your sentences in a way that you don't have to make use of it. That will help you to maintain your code and organize your style sheets. Now, to wrap up our lesson on CSS specificity, number one is that it helps to determine which styles are applied when multiple rules can affect an element. All right. Type selectors are the least specific, followed by class and then the ID. And we should always make use of the important keyword only when it is necessary. So by mastering all these guys, I believe you should be able to code better and have more cleaner code. Thank you all for joining me today. I hope to see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.